Imagine a man thrown from a crashing airplane at 10,000 feet and living to tell the tale. A man who has walked away from burning cars, sinking buses, and a derailed train. Not once, not twice, but 7 times. This isn't a movie. This is the real life of Frane Selak, Croatia's mysterious music teacher, whose life reads like a script rejected by Hollywood for being too far-fetched. Some call him the world's luckiest man. Others say he's cursed. But one thing's certain, Frane Selak is no ordinary survivor. It all began in 1962. Frane was on a train when it suddenly jumped the tracks and plunged into a freezing river. 17 people died, but Frane managed to swim ashore with a broken arm and a few scratches. Just 1 year later, he boarded a plane for the first time. Mid-flight, the cabin door burst open and Frane was sucked out into the sky. He landed, miraculously, in a haystack. The plane crashed, killing everyone else on board. Then came the bus crash in 1966. The vehicle slid off the road into a river. Again, Frane swam to safety while 4 passengers drowned. In 1970, his car burst into flames while driving. He escaped seconds before it exploded. In 1973, another car fire singed his hair and eyebrows, but he walked away again. In 1995, a city bus hit him while crossing the street. He survived with only minor injuries. And in 1996, while driving in the mountains, he swerved to avoid a truck and flew off the road. His car plunged 300 feet into a canyon, but Frane wasn't in it. He had been thrown out of the car and caught a tree branch on the way down. It's almost like death kept trying and kept missing. Then came the final twist. In 2003, at the age of 74, Frane bought his first lottery ticket in years and won over $1 million. After cheating death 7 times, life finally paid him back. Frane once said, "I don't know if I'm lucky or unlucky, but I'm alive." Was he blessed? Cursed? Or simply living proof that reality can be stranger than fiction? Tsutomu Yamaguchi, the man who survived both atomic bombs. If there's ever been a person who stared death in the face, twice, and walked away, it's Tsutomu Yamaguchi. His story is so surreal, it feels like it was plucked from a science fiction film. But it's true. This quiet Japanese engineer survived not one, but both atomic bombings in World War II. On August 6, 1945, Yamaguchi was in Hiroshima on a business trip for Mitsubishi Heavy Industries. As he stepped off a tram on his way to the shipyard, the sky erupted. The first atomic bomb, nicknamed Little Boy, exploded just 3 kilometers away. The blast ruptured his eardrums, blinded him temporarily, and left him with severe burns on his upper body. But he survived. Stunned and injured, he stayed the night in a shelter, then returned home to Nagasaki 2 days later, bandaged, burned, and trying to recover. Then came August 9th. As he was recounting the horrors of Hiroshima to his boss at work, a second flash of light lit up the sky. The second atomic bomb, Fat Man, had just been dropped. Once again, Yamaguchi was caught in the chaos. This time, the blast flattened much of Nagasaki, and once again, Yamaguchi survived. Miraculously, he lived through 2 of the most devastating events in human history, just 3 days apart. He would later go on to live a long life, raise a family, and speak out against nuclear weapons. In 2009, he was officially recognized by the Japanese government as a double hibakusha, a survivor of both bombings. He died in 2010 at the age of 93. How did one man survive both nuclear blasts? Was it luck, fate, or just an unimaginable twist of history? Whatever the answer, Tsutomu Yamaguchi remains one of the most extraordinary survivors the world has ever known. Roy Sullivan, the human lightning rod. Some people seem born lucky. Others seem marked by something stranger. Roy Sullivan, a US park ranger from Virginia, falls squarely into the second category. Between 1942 and 1977, Roy was struck by lightning 7 times and survived every single one. That's not just rare, it's statistically mind-blowing. The odds of being struck once in your lifetime are already about 1 in 15,000. 7 times? It's practically impossible. Yet it happened. Roy's first strike came in 1942 when he was hiding from a storm in a lookout tower. Lightning struck the building and set his hair on fire. That would be enough for most people. But it was just the beginning. Over the next 35 years, lightning would continue to find him, at work, in his truck, in his front yard, even while fishing. He was often burned, thrown through the air, or left dazed, but somehow never killed. By his seventh strike, he had earned the nickname the Human Lightning Rod. Some began to believe he was cursed, others thought he was lying, until Guinness World Records officially recognized his bizarre string of events. But the strangest part? Roy was reportedly terrified of storms and often said that lightning seemed to follow him. He would drive long distances just to escape a storm cloud. Roy Sullivan's life raises more questions than answers. Was it bad luck, a natural phenomenon, or something deeper and unexplainable? One thing is certain, Roy didn't just survive the odds, he redefined them. Violet Jessop, the unsinkable woman. If you wrote her story as fiction, no one would believe it. But Violet Jessop, an Irish-Argentine ocean liner stewardess and nurse, lived through three of the most infamous maritime disasters in history and walked away each time. Her career at sea began aboard the RMS Olympic, the Titanic's sister ship. In 1911, the Olympic collided with a British warship, the HMS Hawke. The damage was severe, but the ship made it back to port. Violet survived unharmed. That alone would have been a lifetime story, but it was just the beginning. In 1912, Violet was working aboard the RMS Titanic when it struck an iceberg in the icy Atlantic. As chaos unfolded around her, she helped passengers into lifeboats and eventually climbed into one herself. The ship sank, but she survived one of the deadliest disasters in modern history. Then, in 1916, during World War I, she volunteered as a nurse aboard the HMHS Britannic, another Titanic sister ship. The Britannic struck a German mine in the Aegean Sea and began to sink. Violet jumped overboard, but was sucked under the ship's propellers. Miraculously, she was blasted away by a rush of water, suffering only a skull fracture. 3 ships, 3 catastrophes, 3 escapes from death. Her fellow crew members began calling her Miss Unsinkable, and rightly so. How many people can claim to have lived through 2 shipwrecks and a major collision? Violet Jessop went on to live a long life, retiring from the sea and passing away peacefully in 1971 at the age of 83. Her story is one of sheer survival, quiet bravery, and the kind of luck, or fate, that defies all explanation. Fidel Castro, the man who survived over 600 assassination attempts. Fidel Castro, the leader of Cuba for nearly 5 decades, wasn't just known for his politics. He became famous for something far stranger. He reportedly survived over 600 assassination attempts during his lifetime. That number almost sounds made up, but many of these plots were documented by Cuban intelligence and are believed to have been planned by the CIA during the Cold War. These weren't ordinary attacks. The attempts to kill Castro were often bizarre and creative. There were stories of poisoned cigars, exploding seashells, and even a plan to give him a toxic diving suit. Some plots were aimed at embarrassing him instead of killing him, like one plan to make his beard fall out, thinking it would make him lose his authority and charm. Despite all this, Castro remained unharmed. Time after time, the plots failed. Some were stopped just in time, while others simply didn't work. He often joked about it, once saying, "If surviving assassination attempts were an Olympic event, I'd win the gold medal." In the end, after surviving decades of danger and attempts on his life, Fidel Castro died of natural causes in 2016, at the age of 90. Whether people saw him as a hero or a dictator, one thing was clear: he had a strange kind of luck. Over and over, death came looking for him, but never succeeded. Anders Hellstrup, almost killed by a meteorite. Most people go skydiving to feel the thrill of free fall, but for Anders Hellstrup, a Norwegian skydiver, one jump nearly turned into a deadly encounter with something from outer space. In 2012, Anders leapt from a plane with a helmet camera rolling, capturing every second of his descent. Everything seemed normal until he watched the footage later. Out of nowhere, a small, fast-moving object whizzed past him at incredible speed, narrowly missing him in mid-air. It was so close, it could have easily struck him or his parachute. Puzzled by what he saw, Anders showed the video to scientists. After careful analysis, they confirmed the unbelievable. The object was a meteorite. More specifically, it was in what's known as a dark flight stage, meaning it had already burned through Earth's atmosphere and was falling silently, no longer glowing or visible to the naked eye. This made Anders one of the only people in history to almost be hit by a meteorite during free fall, and to have the footage to prove it. Scientists called the event extraordinary, a once-in-a-billion kind of moment. What are the odds? Skydiving thousands of feet in the air and a rock from space nearly ends your life, all while a camera is rolling. If Anders had jumped just a second earlier or later, the story might have ended very differently. Sometimes it's not just about cheating death, it's about not even knowing how close it came. Mauro Prosperi, lost in the desert, twice. Mauro Prosperi, an Italian endurance athlete and former Olympic pentathlete, took on one of the world's toughest races in 1994, the Marathon des Sables, a brutal 6-day ultramarathon across the Sahara Desert. But what was supposed to be a test of stamina turned into a fight for survival. Partway through the race, a sudden sandstorm swept across the desert, completely disorienting him. When the storm cleared, Mauro had unknowingly veered over 180 miles off course, deep into the Algerian desert. With no idea where he was, he wandered alone for 9 days in blistering heat, with barely any food or water. To survive, he drank his own urine. At one point, he stumbled upon an abandoned shrine where he found bats roosting in the ceiling and drank their blood to stay alive. Weak, dehydrated, and near death, he was finally found by nomads and rescued. You'd think that would be the end of his desert-running days. But not Mauro. In 2012, nearly 2 decades later, he returned to run the Marathon des Sables again. Unbelievably, he got lost a second time. Luckily, this time he was rescued much sooner. Most people wouldn't survive one such ordeal. Mauro Prosperi survived too. His story is a staggering tale of endurance, grit, and a strange kind of destiny. Whether driven by passion or something more personal, he proved that sometimes the most unbelievable survival stories repeat themselves. Vesna Vulovic, the flight attendant who fell 33,000 feet. On January 26, 1972, Vesna Vulovic, a 22-year-old flight attendant from Yugoslavia, boarded Jet Flight 367, unaware that her name was about to be written into the history books in the most unimaginable way. The flight was supposed to be routine, just another day in the sky. But as the aircraft flew over Czechoslovakia, disaster struck. A bomb planted in the baggage compartment detonated mid-air, tearing the plane apart at an altitude of over 33,000 feet. As the fuselage disintegrated, passengers and crew were thrown into the freezing sky. Every single person on board perished, except Vesna. By a twist of fate, she was trapped inside a portion of the plane's tail section, pinned by a food cart. This part of the fuselage spiraled toward the earth, finally crashing into a snow-covered mountain slope in a remote forested area. The impact should have been fatal, but the snow softened the crash and the wreckage remained partially intact. Vesna was found alive, though barely. Her skull was fractured, both legs were broken, several ribs shattered, and she had slipped into a coma. But she held on. She woke up days later in the hospital, with no memory of the explosion or the fall. Doctors couldn't believe she had survived. Experts later speculated that the pressurized section of the plane she was trapped in, the cold weather, and her low blood pressure may have played a role in her survival. Still, no scientific explanation fully accounts for how she lived through a fall from the edge of space. Vesna Vulovic was later awarded the Guinness World Record for surviving the highest fall without a parachute. She became a national hero in Yugoslavia and lived the rest of her life with quiet humility, never seeking fame. When asked how she survived, she once said, "I was lucky, and I had God's hand holding me." To this day, her story remains one of the most unbelievable survival tales in aviation history, So improbable that it sounds more like myth than fact. But Vesna's fall was real, and so was her will to live. That's all for today. If you found these unbelievable survival stories as mind-blowing as we did, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell so you never miss more stories that defy logic and rewrite the rules of reality. Stay curious. See you in the next one.